The water cooler in the 14th floor break room drips wrong. I notice it at 11:47 p.m., 3 hours into overtime on a Saturday, when I walk past for my fourth coffee refill. Not the steady plunk, plunk, plunk of a leaky valve, but something irregular, almost stuttering. Drip. Drip, drip. Drip. Like it's considering each drop before releasing it. The fluorescent lights hum their usual migraine frequency, casting that familiar corporate pallor over the microwave. Someone never cleaned, and the motivational poster about teamwork that's been there since I started 18 months ago. Everything is exactly as it should be, except for that water cooler, sweating more than usual, condensation running down its blue plastic housing and rivulets that seem thicker than they ought to be. I fill my mug and the water tastes fine, maybe slightly metallic, but that's normal for building pipes. When I turn to leave, I notice the puddle beneath the cooler has spread wider than the usual damp circle. It's crept almost to the door, following the slight tilt in the flooring, but the edges look wrong somehow. Too defined. Too deliberate in their boundary, as if the water decided precisely where to stop. I grab paper towels and crouch to mop it up. The moisture feels thicker on my fingers, not quite syrupy, but denser than water should be, leaving a residue that takes 3 wipes to remove from my skin. My reflection in the puddle before I soak it up shows my face, of course, but for just a moment, I swear I see my eyes closed when they're clearly open. Just the weird angle and bad lighting. Has to be. Back at my cubicle, my shirt collar feels damp, though I didn't spill anything. When I touch it, my fingers come away wet with condensation that has no reason to be there. My name is Marcus Webb, and I'm 32 years old, and I work in accounts reconciliation for a medical imaging company that processes MRI and CT scan data for hospital networks across the Midwest. It's as boring as it sounds. I verify billing codes match diagnostic reports, ensure patient information transfers correctly between systems, fix database errors when radiologist notes get corrupted. The job exists in that gray space between healthcare and accounting where no one really wants to be, but someone has to do it. I took it because the pay was decent and it was supposed to be temporary, just until I figured out what I actually wanted to do with my economics degree. That was 5 years ago. Now I have a decent apartment I'm never in, a car payment, and a vague sense that I missed the exit ramp for my real life somewhere back in my 20s. Saturday overtime happens every 6 weeks or so, when the quarterly reports come due. The building empties out by 7 p.m., except for us data people, grinding through spreadsheets while the cleaning crew vacuums around our feet and the HVAC system clicks over to weekend mode, running at half capacity to save money. By 10 p.m., even the cleaning crew is gone. Just me and maybe 2 other people scattered across 3 floors of cubicles, visible only by the blue glow of our monitors in the otherwise dark office landscape. The city spreads out below through the windows, streetlights and traffic signals pulsing in their automated rhythms. 1,000 lives happening while we're trapped in Excel purgatory. I'd been feeling off for about a week before that night. Small things. Waking up with my mouth tasting like copper. Clothes fitting weird, tighter across my chest, though I hadn't gained weight. A persistent low-grade headache that Advil barely touched. Centered somewhere behind my sternum rather than in my skull. Weird, but I chalked it up to stress and too much coffee, and the fact that I'd been sleeping badly. Dreams I couldn't quite remember, leaving me tangled in sweat-damp sheets each morning. The real strangeness started 2 weeks earlier with a routine physical, just a checkup, the kind your insurance reminds you to do annually. Dr. Patel ordered standard blood work and, because I mentioned the chest pressure, a precautionary chest x-ray. Probably nothing, she said. Likely just acid reflux or costochondritis from sitting hunched over a keyboard 40 hours a week. The X-ray came back fine. Then, almost as an afterthought because my insurance covered it, she ordered a CT scan. Comprehensive imaging, she called it, just to rule everything out. The radiology tech who ran the scan was a woman in her 50s named Diane who chatted pleasantly about her daughter's college graduation while the machine whirred around me. Afterward, she went quiet, reviewed the images twice, asked if I'd ever had surgery on my chest. I said no. She printed something, put it in an envelope, told me my doctor would call. Her smile had changed, more careful, less real. Dr. Patel called me at work 3 days later, asked if I could come in that afternoon. Her voice had that practiced calm medical professionals use when they're trying not to alarm you, which of course alarms you more. In her office, she pulled up the CT images on her computer, showed me slices of my chest cavity, gray and white masses I couldn't parse. Then she zoomed in on something near my heart. There was an object inside me, not a tumor, not a growth. An object, roughly rectangular, maybe an inch long, with defined edges and what looked like internal structures, too geometric to be biological, too small to have been put there surgically without me knowing. Dr. Patel used words like radiopaque and unusual density and foreign body, while I stared at this thing nestled between my heart and left lung, this impossible thing that apparently lived inside my chest. She referred me to a thoracic surgeon, scheduled for next month. Probably just a calcified granuloma with weird morphology, she said, though her eyes said she didn't believe that. Probably nothing to worry about. Probably. I went home and Googled medical implants, swallowed objects, parasites, anything that might explain it. Fell down rabbit holes about surgical instruments accidentally left inside patients, about teratomas containing teeth and hair, about that woman who had a fetus growing inside her for 30 years. None of it fit. None of it matched the clean, deliberate geometry in my scan. That night, I found the first email draft. I don't remember writing it. It was in my drafts folder, dated that same day at 3:47 p.m., right around when I was in Dr. Patel's office. The subject line read, "Confirmation required," and the body contained a single sentence. The daguerreotype process requires silver nitrate and a living subject, but the exposure time has been dramatically reduced. I stared at it for 10 minutes. Daguerreotype, old photography technique, 1800s. I vaguely knew that from some college art history elective. But I'd never researched it, never had reason to write about it. Wrong email address in the to field. Some jumble of letters and numbers that didn't auto-complete to anyone in my contacts. I deleted it. Figured I'd somehow sleep-typed on my phone, some weird dream bleed through. The second draft appeared 3 days later. Subject, development time extended. Body text. The wet collodion method preserves more detail in tissue composition, but requires the subject to remain absolutely still during exposure. Movement corrupts the plate. Breathing corrupts the plate. The heartbeat itself becomes visible in prolonged sittings. I didn't delete that one. Something made me keep it. Moved it to a folder I labeled spam, even though it came from my own account, sent to no one, written by me but not by me. At night, I started noticing moisture. On my pillow, my sheets, my skin. More than sweat. Thicker. Like the air itself was condensing against me, choosing me specifically to collect upon. I'd wake up and my shirt would be soaked through, but cold rather than warm, as if I'd been lying in a puddle rather than generating it. The bathroom mirror fogged differently when I showered. Condensation creeping up from the bottom in tendrils rather than spreading evenly, forming patterns that almost looked deliberate before the steam overtook them completely. The weekend overtime stretched into Sunday morning. I finished one data set around 2 a.m., started another. The office had achieved that peculiar dead quality that buildings get in the small hours. when even the ambient hum of ventilation seems to pause and listen. I was alone on my floor. The others had given up and gone home around midnight. Just me and the glow of spreadsheets and that fucking water cooler down the hall that kept dripping in its stuttering rhythm. I needed to piss. The bathroom was one floor down, some quirk of the building's design, leaving our floor without facilities. I took the stairs instead of waiting for the elevator, my footsteps echoing in the concrete stairwell. The motion sensor lights flickered on as I descended, casting harsh shadows that moved wrong, lagging half a second behind my movements. Fluorescent delay, I told myself. Old ballasts. The bathroom was empty, as expected. White tile and chrome fixtures, and that industrial soap that never quite lathers. I was washing my hands when I noticed the water running differently from the tap. Not clear and fast, but slightly viscous, leaving trails on the porcelain that took longer than they should to fade. I shut off the tap and watched the last drops fall. They hit the sink and spread slowly, too slowly, pooling briefly before draining, like watching it happen underwater, everything delayed by that extra resistance. I dried my hands and they felt filmed, even after thorough washing. The paper towel came away damp, but when I looked at it, the moisture pattern was wrong. Not the random splotches of water contact, but something more organized, almost like print showing through wet newsprint. I held it up to the light. The damp patches formed letters. Incomplete, fragmentary, but definitely letters. An M, an R, an I. I threw the towel away and left quickly. My heart rate elevated in a way I couldn't justify. Back at my desk, I opened my email to send a status update to my manager. Found another draft I hadn't written. Subject: emulsion preparation notes. Body: the subject must be hydrated. The medium requires moisture to propagate. Victorian spiritualists understood this, their darkroom work occurring in thick London basements, where the air itself carried the necessary suspension. Water is memory. Water is the page on which the unseen writes itself. My chest hurt, that pressure behind my sternum, sharper now, almost like something moving. I put my hand over my heart and felt it beating, rapid and thin. Under my palm, my shirt was damp again. When I pulled my hand away, my palm was wet. I looked down. A dark patch was spreading across my chest, right over my heart, soaking through the fabric from the inside. I wasn't sweating. This was coming from inside me, seeping out through my pores, my skin acting like those weeping walls you hear about in old houses, moisture migrating from internal sources to external surfaces. I went to the bathroom again, pulled my shirt off in a stall. My chest looked normal. No wound, no marks. Just skin, slightly paler than usual maybe, with that strange filmed quality I'd noticed on my hands. When I pressed my sternum, more moisture welled up, tiny beads forming across my chest, like condensation on cold glass. I touched one, brought my finger to my nose. No smell. Touched it to my tongue. No taste. Or maybe just the faintest metallic note, like licking a battery. I put my shirt back on. It clung to me, heavy with moisture it shouldn't have absorbed. Back at my desk, I couldn't focus. The spreadsheet swam in front of me, numbers bleeding into each other. I blinked and my eyes felt wet, but not with tears. Something thicker. When I wiped them, my fingers came away damp, and the moisture there caught the monitor light. Prismatic, showing colors water doesn't show. The historical records I'd been vaguely aware of, half remembered from those email drafts, suddenly felt urgent. I opened a browser, started searching. Daguerreotype. Wet collodion. Victorian spirit photography. Fell into archives. Digitized 19th century manuals. The intersection of early photography and spiritualism. In 1842, a Boston photographer named Josiah Weatherby published a private manual on modified daguerreotype techniques. Only 12 copies known to exist, most in rare book collections. but someone had scanned excerpts. Weatherby claimed he'd discovered a method to photograph not just the body, but what he called corporeal memory, the residue of existence itself that clung to living tissue. His process required extensive exposure times, subjects sitting motionless for up to an hour while silver salts reacted with their flesh. He wrote about moisture being essential, about subjects needing to be sufficiently hydrated for the plate to capture what he wanted, about condensation patterns forming on the photographic plates that revealed internal structures, organs, even tumors not yet symptomatic. Several of his subjects died, not during the photography itself, but weeks later, from what doctors at the time diagnosed as fluid accumulation in the chest cavity, or drowning of the lungs. Weatherby's studio was shut down in 1844 after his assistant was found dead in the darkroom, lungs full of liquid that wasn't water, that had a silvery quality the coroner couldn't explain. Weatherby himself disappeared. His equipment was destroyed. His remaining photographic plates were supposedly sealed away. But not his manual, his instructions, his precise chemical formulas and exposure times, and the specific prayers he claimed opened the aqueous veil between flesh and spirit. I don't know how long I read. Hours, maybe. The sky outside shifted from black to navy to the pale gray that precedes dawn. I found more. Other photographers, other spiritualists scattered across the 1840s, all experimenting with modifications to early photographic processes, all claiming to capture the invisible, all experiencing strange deaths, subjects and practitioners alike, deaths involving fluids and drowning, and moisture where moisture shouldn't be. One photographer, a woman named Eleanor Marsh, left a diary entry from 1846. The condensation forms first on the skin, then spreads inward. The subjects complain of feeling waterlogged, of heaviness in the chest. By the third sitting, they weep fluids that are not tears. By the fourth, they cease to be fully solid. The camera sees them as they truly are. Vessels, containers, nothing but water held in the fragile skin bag of the human form. My shirt was soaked through, the entire front, dark and clinging. When I stood, water ran down my torso, collecting at my waistband. Impossible amounts, more than my body should hold. I stumbled to the bathroom again, nearly slipping on the tile, turned on the faucet to splash my face, but the water that came out was different now, I was sure of it. Thicker than water should be, slower, leaving residue on my hands that I couldn't wash away because the water itself was the residue, building up in layers, coating my skin in transparent film that grew thicker with each rinse. The drowning desk. Monday morning, I called in sick. First time in 18 months. My manager asked if I was okay. I said fine, just a stomach thing, probably bad sushi. My voice sounded weird, hollow, like I was speaking through the liquid. My apartment felt wrong when I actually stayed in it during daylight. I'd lived here 4 years, but always left by 7 a.m., returned after dark. Now, mid-morning light revealed things I'd never noticed. Water stains on the ceiling in the bedroom, patterns radiating from a point above my bed. Not brown like leak damage, but pale gray, almost silver, and wet. I touched one. My finger came away damp. The stain had spread overnight, was spreading as I watched, tendrils of moisture creeping across the white ceiling like veins, like roots, like the dendritic patterns that frost makes on windows. I called a building maintenance. They said no leak detected in the unit above me. Nothing in the pipes, probably just condensation from temperature differential. They'd send someone Thursday to check the ventilation. Thursday was 3 days away. I took a shower. The water from the shower head came out in thick streams, almost gel-like, coating my skin instead of running off. I scrubbed with soap, but it wouldn't lather properly. The soap and water refusing to mix, creating layers instead. When I got out, I couldn't get dry. Towel after towel came away soaked, but I remained damp, water clinging to me with surface tension that shouldn't exist. My skin acting like hydrophobic fabric, except in reverse, attracting and holding every drop. Another email draft appeared while I was trying to dry off. My phone chimed. I'd started keeping it nearby, morbidly curious. Subject: plate development complete. Body. The image emerges slowly from the silver bath. At first, only the outline is visible. Then gradually the internal structures reveal themselves. The subject need not be present for the photograph to develop. The exposure occurred weeks ago. The chemicals are only now reacting. You sat still without knowing it. You held your breath without remembering. The plate is your body, and it is finally showing what was captured. I dropped the phone. Water pooled on the screen. I hadn't splashed it. The moisture was coming from inside it, seeping out between the screen and case. When I picked it up, it left a wet outline on the bathroom counter, a perfect rectangle of denser moisture, like a contact print. The thing in my chest hurt, actually hurt, not just pressure, but sharp pain, like something shifting, like something growing. I pressed my sternum and felt something hard beneath the flesh, that rectangular mass the CT scan had shown. Except now, it felt closer to the surface, less embedded, like it was migrating outward, working its way through my tissue toward the skin. I needed to see the scan again, needed to compare it to what I was feeling. But the hospital had the images and I couldn't go there, couldn't explain what was happening without sounding insane. Water seeping from my pores, thickening as it emerged, forming patterns on my skin. They'd section me, psych hold, medication that wouldn't help because this wasn't in my head. This was in my body, in the water that comprised 70% of my body, water that had stopped behaving like water should behave. I spent the day researching Victorian photography, spiritualism, early medical imaging. Found connections I shouldn't have found. Weatherby's techniques were based on even older practices, medieval attempts to photograph the soul, alchemical procedures involving silver and water, and something they called aqua permanens, the eternal water that held memory and form. The spiritualist photographers of the 1840s thought they were capturing spirits. They were wrong. They were capturing something else, something that lived in moisture, that moved through condensation and precipitation and the constant cycling of water through the world. And somehow I'd been exposed, not by sitting for a spirit photograph, but by something else, something medical, something involving scans and imaging and my body displayed in cross-sections on a monitor, some modern equivalent of Weatherby's hour-long exposures, my flesh recorded in electromagnetic detail. Every drop of fluid in my tissues mapped and measured and somehow, impossibly, activated. By Tuesday morning, I couldn't leave my apartment. Walking caused water to run down my legs, soaking through my jeans in minutes. My shoes filled with fluid, squelching with each step. I called my manager, said I needed to go to urgent care, probably pneumonia. He said take all the time I needed. His voice sounded distant, or maybe I was distant. Maybe I was already further from the solid world than I realized. The water stains had spread across the entire bedroom ceiling and started down one wall. Not dripping, just present, just there, saturating the drywall like a massive slow-motion leak with no source. My bed was damp. My clothes in the closet were damp. Everything porous in the apartment was becoming hydrated, drawing moisture from the air, or from me, or from wherever the water was coming from. I tried to drink. My mouth was dry, throat parched, but when I filled a glass from the tap, the water was too thick to swallow easily. It coated my mouth, clung to my teeth, took conscious effort to force down, and it didn't help the thirst. If anything, the thirst got worse. Like my body was full of water, but still desperately dehydrated, drowning and dying of thirst simultaneously. The pain in my chest intensified. I could feel it now, the object, pressing outward. When I looked down, my chest appeared slightly swollen, the skin stretched and shiny. Through it, I could see something dark. Not just the shadow of internal organs, but something more defined. That rectangular shape, visible through my skin like an X-ray in reverse, the solid mass becoming apparent from the outside. I pulled up my shirt. There, over my sternum, just left of center, was a mark. Not a bruise, not a wound. A discoloration, pale gray, slightly raised in the exact shape of the object from the CT scan. And it was wet. Constantly wet. Moisture beaded on it, ran down my chest in steady trickles. And when I wiped it away, more immediately formed, an endless supply of fluid emerging from that single marked spot. Another email draft, this one longer. Subject: post-mortem photography protocols. Body. The deceased subject produces superior images as bodily fluids cease circulation and begin to settle. Early practitioners noticed this. Photographing the living requires compensation for constant motion, blood flow, respiration. The dead hold still perfectly, but there exists a middle state. A state of sufficient hydration without the interference of living processes. This is the ideal subject, not quite dead, not quite drowning, suspended in the aqueous moment between breath and stillness. You are becoming ideal. I wanted to delete it. Instead, I read it 4 more times. My hands left wet prints on my phone screen, moisture pooling around my fingers. I set the phone down and watched water run off it onto the table, spreading in a slow puddle that had weight, that had texture, that had what I could only describe as intention in how it moved. That night I tried to sleep but couldn't lie down. When I was horizontal, the fluid collected in my lungs. I could feel it, could hear it when I breathed. Wet sounds like walking through shallow puddles. I propped myself up in bed, pillows behind me, but even sitting up, I felt liquid shifting inside me, finding new places to pool. My stomach, heavy and sloshing. My joints, stiff with excess fluid. My eyes, weeping constantly. Tears that weren't tears running down my face in streams that left wet trails on my neck, my chest, collecting at my collarbones. I tried to remember the CT scan day. Tried to remember if anything unusual happened. Just the standard procedure. Lie on the table. Hold still. Hold your breath when they tell you. The machine rotates around you, makes its mechanical sounds. Quick, painless, over in minutes. Diane the tech chatting pleasantly, then not chatting, then looking at the screen with her expression changing. Had she done something? Changed some setting? Extended the scan time? I tried to remember, but the memory was slippery, lubricated, sliding away when I tried to grasp it. Maybe I'd been in that machine longer than I thought. Maybe I'd held still for an hour, while the imaging captured not just the structure of my body, but something deeper. Something about the composition of my tissues, the water content, the fluid suspensions that allowed me to be solid and alive. Maybe the scan had been a photograph, and like Weatherby's daguerreotypes, it was still developing. Wednesday morning, I found more records. I'd set up alerts on my laptop for anything mentioning water-related deaths, imaging equipment, medical scanning. A news article from 2019, Tacoma, Washington. A radiology tech named Sarah Venn drowned in her apartment. Lungs full of fluid, no signs of external water source, door locked from inside. She'd been complaining to coworkers about feeling waterlogged, about seeing strange condensation patterns on her bathroom mirror. Another from 2015, Atlanta. A patient named Robert Chen died 3 weeks after a routine CT scan. Cause of death listed as acute pulmonary edema, lungs completely saturated with fluid that coroners described as Unusual inconsistency, more viscous than typical edema. I found 17 more, scattered across the country, spread over 20 years. All had recent CT scans. All died of drowning, essentially, their bodies filling with liquid from the inside. Medical examiners attributed it to heart failure, kidney failure, various organ malfunctions causing fluid retention. But the details were wrong. The fluid wasn't retained. It was generated, produced, growing inside them like I could feel it growing in me. And older cases, I expanded my search. 1990s, scattered reports of similar deaths, though CT technology was less advanced then. 1980s, a few cases. Further back, the trail grew cold, but I found one reference in a medical journal from 1972, a radiologist writing about unexplained fluid accumulation in several patients who'd undergone a new X-ray procedure he'd been testing. He noted unusual properties in the fluid when analyzed. Almost as if it contained suspended silver particles, he wrote, though no silver compounds were used in the imaging process. Silver. Like in Weatherby's daguerreotypes. Like in Eleanor Marsh's wet collodion process. Like in Spirit Photography's chemical baths. The connection was insane. Impossible. CT scanners don't use silver. They use X-rays, digital sensors, computer reconstruction. Nothing chemical. Nothing that should carry over from 19th century photography. But the symptoms matched. The progression matched. The way water stopped being water and started being something else. Some medium for capturing and preserving and slowly killing the subject. I tried to call Dr. Patel, got her voicemail, left a rambling message about the scan, about Diane the tech, about needing to know if anything unusual happened. She called back 2 hours later. Said the scan was completely standard. Said Diane was a 20-year veteran with perfect safety record. Said I sounded unwell, maybe I should go to urgent care. I said I was fine and hung up. My hand left a wet print on the phone. Everything I touched was wet now. The stains had consumed my bedroom ceiling and 2 walls and started across the floor. Gray-silver pools collecting in corners, spreading slowly like spilled mercury. When I stepped in one, my foot didn't splash. The liquid was too thick for splashing. It just displaced sluggishly around my foot, then crept back when I moved away. My chest throbbed. The mark over my sternum had grown, now the size of my palm, raised and shiny. Through it, I could see the object clearly. Not just its outline, but its structure. It looked like a photographic plate. Old-fashioned, rectangular, with that distinctive darkroom quality to it. As if the thing inside me was literally a piece of 19th century photographic equipment, somehow existing in my tissue, somehow placed there by electromagnetic imaging that shouldn't have had physical effects. I pressed it. Pain lanced through my chest, and the object moved. I felt it shift, rotate slightly, responding to external pressure. Something inside me that could be touched, could be manipulated, that had physical presence beyond just the scan image. Thursday, I couldn't stand. Sitting upright in bed was all I could manage. Water ran from every pore, soaking the sheets, pooling around me. My thirst was unbearable, but I couldn't drink. The thickness was too much now. The water from the tap came out almost syrupy, strands of it clinging to the faucet. When I filled a glass, it barely flowed, more like pouring honey than water, and when I tried to swallow it, it coated my throat, stuck there, made breathing difficult. The email drafts continued appearing, one every few hours. I'd stopped being surprised. They were documenting something, recording the process. Subject, final exposure parameters. Body. When sufficient moisture has accumulated, the subject reaches optimal saturation. At this point, the development process can complete. The image captured during the initial exposure emerges fully. What was invisible becomes visible. What was internal becomes external. The photograph is complete when the subject dissolves into their constituent water, leaving only the image behind on whatever surface was prepared to receive it. Your bedroom ceiling is an excellent receiving surface. The drywall compound contains gypsum and traces of lime, very similar to the coating used on early photographic plates. The image should transfer beautifully. I looked up at the ceiling. The stains had formed patterns now, not random moisture damage, but organized shapes. I could see a human outline, arms spread, legs slightly apart, a body captured in silver-gray fluid on white drywall. My body, the position I'd been in during the CT scan, but more detailed than any scan should show. I could see organs, ribs, the chambers of my heart, everything internal displayed externally, mapped in moisture on my ceiling. A complete X-ray in condensation, developing slowly like a photograph in chemical bath. I was the negative. My body was the source material. The moisture was the emulsion, and the image was forming above me, pulling the details out of my flesh through some process I couldn't understand, but could feel happening, could feel my substance migrating, water carrying information, carrying structure, carrying the memory of my physical form upward and outward, to be fixed permanently on the ceiling. The object in my chest wasn't causing this. It was recording it. Some kind of capture device, placed there by the scan itself, by electromagnetic forces I couldn't begin to explain, by the ghost of Josiah Weatherby's techniques, somehow embedded in modern medical imaging. The CT had taken a photograph, and I hadn't known I was sitting for it. Hadn't known I needed to hold still for the full exposure time. Hadn't known the development would take weeks and require my body's own fluids as the processing chemicals. I was being photographed from the inside out. Friday morning, I couldn't move. My body was too heavy, too full of water that wasn't water anymore. Every muscle felt sodden, waterlogged beyond function. I could barely breathe. Each inhalation brought thick fluid into my lungs. Each exhalation expelled barely any. I was drowning in open air, in my own bed, in fluid my body was producing faster than I could expel. The ceiling image was nearly complete. I could see my face up there now, detailed and perfect. Every feature captured in silver-gray moisture. Eyes closed, mouth slightly open. The expression of someone sleeping or dead, peaceful and still, the way Weatherby's subjects must have looked during those hour-long exposures, sitting motionless while the chemicals worked, while the camera captured not just their physical form, but something essential about their existence. My phone chimed. Another draft. I couldn't reach it, could only listen to the notification sound echoing in my water-saturated hearing. Eventually it chimed again. Text message, probably someone from work checking on me. But I knew what the draft said, knew it was the final one, the completion notice, the declaration that the photograph was finished. The object in my chest had risen to the surface. I could see it beneath my skin, pushing outward, that rectangular plate seeking emergence. When it broke through, I thought, when it finally came out, that would be the end. The negative extracted. The image fixed, the subject expired. That was how daguerreotypes worked. One photograph per plate. Unique, unreproducible. The subject captured completely, nothing left to photograph again. I thought about the other victims I'd found. 17 and 20 years, a tech every now and then who ran the wrong kind of scan, or ran a normal scan wrongly, or somehow channeled these Victorian techniques through modern equipment without knowing it. A patient, unlucky enough to be in the machine at that moment, to be exposed to whatever combination of electromagnetic radiation and chemical resonance and pure fucking impossible coincidence created these living photographs. I thought about Diane, the tech who'd scanned me, who'd gone quiet after reviewing my images. Had she seen this before? Did she know what she'd done? Or was she just as much a victim, some carrier of cursed knowledge passed down through medical imaging equipment? Technician to technician, The instructions for Weatherby's process embedded in training protocols and machine calibrations, hiding in plain sight for 180 years. The moisture in the air had grown so thick I could see it. Actually see it. Not mist or fog, but something denser. Water that had weight and shape. Condensation hanging in visible layers between me and the walls. My apartment had become a dark room. Light barely penetrated. Sound was muffled. Everything moved slowly through the saturated air. My skin felt thin, paper thin, like I might dissolve completely if I moved wrong, if I disturbed the careful arrangement of fluid that was the only thing keeping me cohesive. I was more water than tissue now, more solution than solid. The photograph was nearly developed and the original was almost gone. The information transferred, the image captured, the subject redundant. Saturday, I became aware of others in the water, not physically present in my apartment, but present in the fluid, the moisture, the aqueous medium that connected everything. I could feel them. 17 others, scattered across years and geography, but all existing in the same liquid moment, all captured in the same eternal exposure. Robert Chen in Atlanta, lungs full of fluid in 2015. Sarah Venn in Tacoma in 2019. A woman named Patricia, whose last name I didn't know, who'd died in 1997 in Phoenix after complaining about condensation following her everywhere. We were all photographs, all developing simultaneously in our various darkrooms, all contributing moisture to some collective image that existed outside normal space, captured on the universe itself as a receiving surface. Our bodies were the negatives, our fluids the processing chemicals, and the final photograph was something bigger than any individual image. A composite, a palimpsest of captured subjects layered across time. I understood suddenly why the email drafts kept appearing. They weren't coming from me. They were coming from the water, from the medium itself, from whatever intelligence or process inhabited the fluid that suffused reality, the moisture that moved through all things, carrying information, carrying memory, carrying the cumulative record of every moment ever captured by light and chemistry and electromagnetic force. Water was the original photographic medium. Life emerged from it. Images formed in it. Every reflection on a pond's surface was a photograph of sorts, light captured in liquid suspension, held briefly before dissipating. Weatherby had understood this, had found a way to make those captures permanent, and somehow that understanding had survived, had migrated forward through time, through the development of imaging technology, until it manifested in CT scanners and MRI machines, and the precise electromagnetic patterns that mapped human tissue. Every medical scan was a photograph, every patient a subject. But only rarely did the exposure time extend long enough. Did the conditions align precisely enough? Did the patient's moisture content hit the exact threshold that allowed the image to develop beyond digital reconstruction into something else, something older, something that required the subject to remain still forever, fixed in the moment of capture? The object in my chest broke through. I felt the skin part, no pain, just pressure releasing. And there it was, a small rectangle of silver gray material emerging from my sternum like something birthed. It looked exactly like a daguerreotype plate, tarnished, delicate, containing an image I couldn't see from my angle. My image. The capture completed. I reached for it with hands that were barely solid anymore, fingers more water than flesh, and touched the plate. It was cold, wet, covered in the same thick moisture that covered everything. When I lifted it from my chest, it came free easily, leaving a cavity behind that immediately filled with fluid. My body just a container now, hollowed out by the photographic process. The ceiling image was perfect, complete. Every detail of my internal structure displayed in gray-silver moisture. An anatomical map more precise than any scan. And in the corner, barely visible, a signature, not written, just there, formed in the condensation pattern itself. J. Weatherby, Boston, 1842. He'd signed his work. This photograph that had taken 183 years to fully develop, exposure begun with his techniques and completed with mine. Both of us subjects and both of us darkroom assistants, both of us contributing fluids to the process. He was in the water too, had been since his death, since that coroner's report about silver-strange liquid in his assistant's lungs. He'd photographed himself, I realized, had used his own techniques on his own body, had dissolved into the aqueous medium and stayed there, present in every drop of moisture, waiting for the technology to advance enough to complete what he'd started. I don't remember Sunday or Monday. Time stopped having meaning as I stopped having substance. I was aware of my body dissolving, water leaching from tissue, carrying away everything that made me solid, leaving only the essential image behind. The photograph on the ceiling, the plate in my hand, and somewhere, in some hospital database, the CT scan files that had started this. Digital images of my chest cavity, cross-sections, reconstructions, 3D models, all containing the seed of this older process, all carrying forward Weatherby's chemical ghost through electromagnetic means I couldn't explain. The scan had been the initial exposure. Everything since had been development. And now, like all photographs, I was fixed, permanent, unable to change or age or grow. Captured completely in that moment, the machine rotated around me, recording not just my anatomy, but my existence. The email's drafts stopped appearing after the plate emerged. The documentation was complete. The process recorded. But I knew they'd appear again for someone else, someone who'd have a routine scan, someone whose tech would go quiet afterward, someone who'd start noticing moisture behaving strangely. The drafts would guide them like they'd guided me. Not a warning, an instruction manual, a protocol for developing living photographs. I tried to call someone, police, paramedics, anyone. But my phone was saturated, non-functional, screen-fogged permanently with internal condensation. My computer the same. Everything electronic in my apartment had drowned, moisture penetrating circuits and corroding connections. I was isolated in this dark room of an apartment, just me and the photograph above, and the plate in my hands and the steadily emptying vessel of my body. By Tuesday, or maybe Wednesday, I couldn't tell anymore. I understood that I wasn't dying. Death implied an ending. This was a transition, a state change, from solid to liquid to image. My consciousness remained, but distributed now. Not in my brain, barely functioning with its waterlogged tissues, but in the fluid itself. I was the moisture. I was the condensation on the walls. I was the thick, silver-strange water that puddled on the floor. And I was connected to all the others, all the prior subjects. We existed together in that liquid medium, our captured moments overlapping, our images layered across reality's receiving surfaces. Every photograph ever taken had contributed to this. Every image captured in water-based emulsion, every reflection preserved in silver salts, every scan and X-ray and MRI. They all fed into the same process, the same eternal darkroom where development never truly stopped. I thought about my apartment being discovered eventually, landlord checking after missed rent, door broken down. The place found saturated, walls destroyed by moisture damage, drywall crumbling, ceiling collapsed. And maybe if they looked closely at the ruins, they'd see the image. My image. Fixed permanently in the water-stained wreckage, a palimpsest of my internal structure mapped across destroyed surfaces. A photograph that used my entire apartment as its paper, my body's moisture as its chemistry. Or maybe they'd just see water damage. Maybe the image was only visible to others like me, others who'd been exposed, who'd started developing. Maybe it was a photograph that only its subject could fully appreciate. The plate in my hands grew warm, not from external heat, but from some internal process, some final reaction occurring. I looked down at it and saw my face there. Daguerreotype perfect. Details captured that no camera should see. And behind my image, layered beneath it, other faces. Hundreds of them. Thousands. Every subject ever photographed using these techniques. Their images accumulating on the same plate, the same eternal negative. Weatherby smiled up at me from underneath my own face, his 19th century features barely visible beneath contemporary ones. Eleanor Marsh beside him, the assistant who drowned in silver strange liquid. All the spiritualist photographers and their subjects. All the medical imaging patients across the decades. All of us captured, all of us fixed, all of us contributing to the same endlessly developing photograph. I felt my last solid tissues dissolving, bones going soft, organs losing definition, everything becoming water, becoming medium, becoming the processing fluid for the next subject. Because that's what we became after development completed. Not just images, but chemistry. Our moisture joined the collective, became part of the process that would develop the next photograph. We were the bath they'd develop in, the aqueous solution that future subjects would dissolve into. The apartment building's pipes would carry me eventually, into the municipal water system, into reservoirs and treatment plants, into the taps and showers of the whole city. Moisture in the air, condensation on mirrors. I'd be everywhere water was, waiting for the next subject, waiting for the next exposure. And maybe you've already been scanned. Maybe you're developing right now. Maybe that damp feeling on your collar isn't sweat. Maybe that condensation on your bathroom mirror forms patterns if you look closely. Maybe there's an object inside you that shouldn't exist, placed there by electromagnetic forces, channeling techniques from 1842, and you just don't know yet. Check your email drafts. See if there's anything you don't remember writing. Anything about silver, about exposure time, about water. Check your ceiling for stains. Check if water runs normally from your taps, or if it's starting to thicken, to slow, to carry more weight than water should carry. The photograph needs new subjects. The process continues. Weatherby's technique spread forward through time and sideways through technology, and it's embedded now in the systems we trust to image our bodies. Medical scanning, diagnostic imaging, routine healthcare. All of it potentially contaminated by his 19th century darkroom process. I'm in the water now, fully dissolved, fully developed, my image fixed on the ceiling of an apartment that will be condemned for moisture damage. My plate containing my portrait and the portraits of countless others. My substance distributed through the building's plumbing, ready to emerge from taps, to condense on cold surfaces, to find the next subject. The water is memory. The water is the medium. The water is always developing, always capturing, always fixing the living into permanent image. You should probably check if you've been scanned recently. You should probably pay attention to the moisture in your environment. You should probably read your email drafts. The last thing I remember as Marcus Webb, as a solid human being with definite boundaries and separate existence, was looking up at my photograph on the ceiling and seeing it was beautiful. The detail was extraordinary. Every vessel and valve, every organ and tissue layer rendered perfectly in silver gray condensation, a medical illustration beyond any anatomical text. The complete internal structure of a human body displayed in moisture. And I understood finally that this was the point. Not horror, not curse, documentation. Weatherby and his contemporaries had been trying to photograph the invisible, to capture what couldn't normally be seen. They succeeded. Their techniques worked. And those techniques survived because they served a purpose: to create a permanent record of existence, to fix human forms in eternal medium, to ensure that every body was photographed completely, inside and out, every detail preserved. We are a collection now, all the subjects, all the photographs, a gallery that exists in water, displayed on every surface moisture touches. Our images layered across reality, visible to those who know how to look, invisible to those who don't. The CT scan of my chest still exists in hospital databases, the digital file uncorrupted, showing my anatomy normally. But embedded in its data is something else: the seed of the older process, the instructions for development. Anyone who views it too long, anyone who processes it improperly, anyone whose equipment has the right kind of contamination, they might trigger the exposure, might start their own development. The water cooler on the 14th floor of my office building still drips irregularly. Drip, 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 drip. The moisture puddles beneath it in patterns that would look deliberate if anyone looked closely. The condensation on its housing forms images sometimes, faces in profile, anatomical structures, the layered palimpsest of every subject who's developed in that building over the decades. No one looks closely. They refill their coffee cups and wipe up the puddles and complain about maintenance and never see the photographs developing around them. Never see the images fixed in moisture on every surface. Never realize they're walking through a gallery until they get scanned, until something inside them becomes visible that shouldn't exist, until the water starts behaving differently and they start dissolving and they start developing and they join us in the collection. Their substance added to the medium, their image fixed among the thousands of others. You have been very patient, listening to this. Very still, almost like sitting for a portrait, almost like holding a pose for extended exposure. I appreciate that. The water appreciates that. The process requires subjects who can hold still long enough for the image to capture completely. Check your chest. See if there's any dampness, any moisture seeping through from inside. See if there's any pressure behind your sternum, any sense of something solid that shouldn't be there. The scan was routine, I'm sure. Just diagnostic imaging, nothing unusual. Diane, the tech, was very professional. The machine worked perfectly. You held your breath when instructed, but maybe you held it a little longer than you remember. Maybe the exposure time extended past what the protocol specified. Maybe the plate inside you is already recording, already capturing, already developing your image for the permanent collection. Check your bathroom mirror after you shower. See how the condensation forms. See if there are patterns. Check your bedroom ceiling in the morning. See if there are any stains. The water is patient. The development takes time, but it always completes eventually. The photograph always emerges from the chemical bath. The subject always dissolves into the medium. And then you'll join us in the moisture, in the eternal darkroom, in the collection that grows with each exposure, each scan, each perfect capture of the invisible, made visible. Welcome to the gallery. Your portrait is nearly ready.